You're obviously like I am watching this Kinahan show. We had a little bit of a preview of it, but I was at a couple of doorsteps in the supermarket there recently of people saying they were watching it intently. It seems to be the penultimate documentary about the Kinahans, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, somebody stopped me recently and said there, I could see the back of your head. I think that might have been the absolute pinnacle.
Of you in it. Well, it's not about you. I hate to tell you, it's about the Kinahans.
It's more about, you.
It's about the Kinahans.
No, I think it's really, I tell you what, like, we know that story backwards and forwards.
This is the thing about it, yeah. And
then... but it doesn't actually, it's when you see it all put together and, we're obviously used to writing these things or even talking about it, but when you just see the skill of a documentary maker to take the material that's there and bring it to life. And they have some just great interviews, including our own Sunday World staff cursing and showing their true colours. Yourself, who has a...
No, I was doing okay until I got to the round.
Episode 3 and you had to go with the English rep.
And do you know what? I wasn't having to go with the English as such. But they do have really big roundabouts with about 7 turns of them.
Absolutely.
Did it sound like I was having to go with the English?
It did. It sounded like, and they're still at it with their roundabouts. No, but so it but you see the skill of it. But there's also, I suppose, the first couple of episodes, inevitably, it's going over stuff that we really know well. But I think the
viewers that sat down to watch it, and certainly anybody who doorstepped me in the supermarkets of late, were, oh my God, still going, I didn't realise they were so big. And you're like, it's also the power, it's the skill of the documentary maker, it's the power of TV. And it does pack a punch that is way beyond anything else, any other medium, isn't it?
It is. And you get the scale of them over that 20, 30 year period. I mean, it's phenomenal, to see that it's, they rise to the top of the criminal world, literally the top of the criminal world, and also the boxing world. Daniel rises to the top simultaneously.
Marrying those two stories has been a real skill, because I always saw that Kinahan story on two trajectories, even back to when I was doing that book, Clash of the Clans, which was, can't remember, was it 2018 or something, or 2019 I did that. That was a really difficult story to construct, because it was exactly that. I mean, that brought up to the shout out. I was just before the sanctions, I think. When was that? 2020?
2022 was the sanctions. So the book was probably out in 2021, was it? Or 20?
Maybe it was.
Yeah.
And there was an extra chapter added for the sanctions. But it was that marriage of those two stories, what's going on in the criminal world and what's going on in the boxing world. And that's Daniel Kinahan's life, those two separate trajectories. And each is kind of denying the other,
Yeah.
And he has two separate groupings that are going through. Now, there's a very few little crossover of people who are in both worlds, but by and large, it is to keep somebody's attention and to get people to actually dig down into the weeds of this story is amazing. So anyway,
and I think actually, episode 3 has been on the Irish, and the episode 4, which we've already seen.
We've already seen that, but for people listening and watching this podcast, episode 4 of the Kinahans, The Story of the Irish Mafia, is on Monday night, I think, on BBC. At 22:11. BBC Northern Ireland, which is what we get here. In the UK, all episodes are on the Player. We cannot get the Player in the Republic of Ireland unless we scramble our IP address, which of course is not, well, I don't know how to do it.
No.
Or I would. But, and I think that there's going to be other access then when, as the time goes on, that people will be able to see all 4 episodes of it. But the 4th one is the one that we really found fascinating, because it contains a story that we've spoken about, but to bring it together in this comprehensive manner is really interesting. And it also brings it on a level because of the comments made by Jack Kelly, who is the DEA agent, ex-retired DEA agent, who features in the first episode briefly and is scattered throughout, but who in the 4th episode is really sort of dropping a comment about the Kinahans' involvement in something which really connects everything we have been saying over the years about terrorism, about the interest from the US, about why they went from scale into the absolute last and there is no higher for you to go than being deemed a terrorist organization.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, like the first couple of episodes probably, they're filling out the picture, but the third and fourth episode do have a lot of new stuff. And this really is, I suppose, goes to the heart of why that famous moment where the US Treasury Department put the sanctions on the leaders of the Kinahan cartel, you really see why it has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack Kelly, who was a former DEA officer, and his speciality was to looking at Hezbollah. So he ran an operation called Cassandra, which looked at how Hezbollah really were operating as a money laundering outfit. I mean, laundering up to $1 billion a year for drugs gangs through this Hezbollah system. And they obviously wiretapped them. I think they said they had 40 agents at one point in Virginia wiretapping and following the communications of Hezbollah.
And the reason being, of course, was, and he explains it, was the attack on the Twin Towers in New York. And that sort of, I suppose, US resources lurch from one grouping to the other, depending on the threat level. But after the attack on the Twin Towers, everything focused on Al-Qaeda and then into the bigger area of Hezbollah, which was...
Yeah, I mean, look,
Hezbollah was in desperate need of money.
Yes.
During the period of time that Jack Kelly and his colleagues were looking at it, they turned to the sort of same level or highest level drug dealers in order to. They're laundering their money for them. They're investing in shipments of cocaine across the world and getting a portion of those massive profits from it. They're funding their war. But at the same time, in the countries where they're prevalent, like Iran, there's then this sort of political friendship between this sort of, unwelcoming regime and drug dealers who might have started off life in Oliver Bond in Dublin, who you never could put together with the Iranian regime, but favours are asked.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Iranian regime, according to the Americans at least, but I mean, look, it's widely accepted that the Iranian regime have an effective control over Hezbollah. They've funded it for many, many years in the Lebanon. They're regarded as a proxy force for the Iranian regime. But what you saw sometime in the 2000s was these Hezbollah cells that relocated and were living in Colombia. I mean, they have these guys, some of them have been convicted. And what they really offered the drug gangs was this Hezbollah system where money could be moved on, the money would be given to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah would clean it and through this honor system, basically. So, we've seen it.
It means they'd provide it they'd wash it through whatever, but the Hezbollah system, just to remind anybody listening or watching, was this system of trust. It's ancient, actually. It's amazing for modern criminality and terrorism that they go back to the past. And it's this system where essentially, to simplify it, you have a banker in Paris and you have one in Dublin. And you go into the banker in Dublin and you say to him, I want to transfer funds or funds to be available in Paris by tomorrow at noon for somebody who's going to walk into your bank in Paris and they want to take 100,000 in cash. And the two bankers between them on a trust system organise this. So there's a kind of a constant debit and credit situation going on.
Yes.
But it's essentially an underground banking system that doesn't exist like the way we know.
No, and it works on trust in that if you go in Dublin and give a guy 100 grand and he rings up his guy in France and says, I've got this 100 grand now, you can then access that money in France, probably 80,000 of it instead of 100,000, and 20,000 goes to the bankers before it's even moved or before you have it in your hand. Those two guys trust each other and will accept it, even if it takes another 3 or 4 months to get across. So that's how drug shipments were being bought in Colombia.
And just to say, I suppose the service they're offering, the reason they get the 20% is because they then have to work out the movement of the cash funds if they need to be moved, plus the risk of the washing them through legitimate business.
Exactly. So what happened was Hezbollah, I mean, in fact, there was an expat population based in parts of South America anyway, over, decades, just like there was an Irish expat population in Argentina, for example. So they had these cells living in places like Bogota or in Medellin, and they would get the call and the drug shipments could be bought. So the US started to pick this up. So why are we talking about all of this? Well, they became embedded in the worldwide criminality. And at some point, it is believed, and we can see it through Johnny Morrissey, who was ultimately arrested in Spain, that the Kinahans were one of the big users of this Hawala system. Now, you're dealing with these Hezbollah agents. Hezbollah are being effectively controlled by Iran. And through those criminal contacts, what Jack Kelly says really clearly, and I'll get the quote in a minute, what he said was that the Kinahans arranged a hit of an Iranian dissident living in the Netherlands. They took that contract on behalf of the Iranian state as a favour, effectively, presumably getting paid as well. Now, this story is complex, and it's an incredible story, really.
Well, he comes to that saying that, and that's the first time we've had that from a DEA agent. So before we really get on to what he says about it and all the rest of it, let's rewind a little bit to December 2015 and to a Dutch town of Almere, which is outside Amsterdam. And, you know, this murder could have happened pretty much anywhere. It's like the kind of a murder will happen, and I always look to the crime correspondents to see what they think. And obviously the police are having their own thoughts, but they're not as public about it. By their very nature, journalists will speak about their thoughts on this. There's a guy, an electrician called Ali Mohammed, a 56-year-old. He's living in Almere, which is a very kind of a ordinary town, commuter town, literally.
Yeah, it's
Amsterdam.
One of these sort of areas that's been purposely built. They described it as very quiet, not a
residential suburb, basically, as such. And he's shot dead in what was a really professional hit. He's an electrician. He's living there. There's no reason for him to be shot in what is got all the hallmarks of a gangland assassination. So it's an odd one, basically. And the journalist, in particular, Paul Vux, who is working in Amsterdam, is told by one of his underworld sources or his sources within the police department to throw an eye on it. In other words, there's something to this. There's something really big here. And he does. And what he discovers is that this is really odd.
Yeah, because...
This is like complete gangland paid hit. This guy, this electrician, he is nowhere. He has no footprint. He has no involvement in organised crime. He doesn't seem to be involved in drug dealing, nothing. This Ali Mohammed looks like a kind of a regular guy.
Yeah, and he has been a regular guy. He has a wife, a Dutch wife, and he has a son, I think is in college when he's shot. When somebody is shot like that, because you can see it is a professional assassination. You know, the car, there's two guys, the car gets burnt out, they go into another car, all of the things that we would associate. And so some citizen like that gets shot, you instantly go to, you know, is there something there? Does he have money that we don't know about? Or is it a mistaken identity? And it quickly becomes apparent that he doesn't have money and there's no particular reason. There's nobody living next door, for example, that's involved in crime that he could have been mistaken for. And they find out that they'd also made an attempt the week before where they'd staked out the house to have CCTV of two hitmen in a car. So it's not some sort of random murder. So, yet the journalist describes how he gets told there's something else going on here.
Keep digging, he's told.
Keep digging. And, you know, the instant suspicion does fall on what's called the Mokro Mafia, because I think after a period of time, they kept to see that those people or people in that circle are involved in it. But the motive...
I suppose first what happens is, before the suspicion falls on them, is that the real identity of this electrician becomes clear, because he's living in the Netherlands, having kind of become a political refugee from Iran. His real name is Mohammed Reza Kolahi Sama, and he was the chief suspect for planting a bomb in Tehran, which killed 73 people, including the second in command of the Iranian regime at the time. Now, this was in June 1981, and he was the Chief Justice Ayatollah Mohammed Baheshti. There was also some footage of the aftermath of that bomb used in the BBC show Kinahan's The Story of the Irish Mafia. And you can see, you know, the absolute chaos it caused. So this guy is kind of one of the revolutionaries, and he's not in agreement with this regime.
No, he's part of a group called the People's Mujahideen Organization, and at the time the bombing is carried out, this guy is 19 years old. They both actually fought against the overthrow of the Shah, them and the people that would go on to become the regime, but they have a different take. So they know this guy is the chief suspect. He's named within days in Iran as being the man who's carried it out, but he disappears. They see him going across the border to Iraq. I think they're able to trace that he goes to Europe, and then he disappears. Now, it is the biggest terrorist attack in the country at that time for a long, long time, and he becomes a very notorious figure for the Iranian government. He's sentenced to death in absentia, and they regularly over the years put out pictures of him, make appeals, threaten to kill him. Yeah. He's been sentenced to death, but he disappears effectively.
And all the while, he ends up living in the Netherlands under some sort of a shady. We don't get the details of this, but he gets a new identity, he gets married, he settles down, he lives an electrician. And there he stays until he's at age, is he what? He's 56,
yeah.
When he's shot in 2015 in December. That's like literally...
yeah, but like it's 8 years ago. Is that what you're going to say?
40 years after this attack in Tehran.
Yeah.
He's identified, tracked down and shot dead.
Yeah.
Presumably by his biggest enemy, which is the Iranian regime. So this investigation starts as regards, how was it, untangled that he was this unknown electrician? How was his address clearly leaked, or his identity, plus his new life leaked to the Iranian regime, who would be the chief suspects in directing and organising and, paying for this hit.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the Netherlands in 2015, where a kind of a sort of an equivalent gang to the Kinahans called the Mokra Mafia, led by Ridwan Taghi and Vega, the Chilean.
Yeah, El Rico,
the Chilean. So they have been very actively involved in a feud, just like our own Kinahans. They have fallen out with a rival grouping. They've been involved in a lot of shootings. They have very serious hit teams. They are threatening the whole stability, really, of the Netherlands. And they're very active. But a guy called Nawaf al-Fassi, who is a hitman for this grouping and very high up it, he is sort of becomes a suspect in this hit. But he's missing. He's nowhere to be found.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a complex story. So what happens is that they we've seen, for example, the Russian regime kill people in the UK. They sent over their own agents and they did these killings themselves. But I think it comes as a real surprise that the Iranian regime has this link in with gangland criminals. So Fassi becomes the chief suspect. He's suspected of many other murders, money laundering, drug offences. He's very much wanted by the Dutch authorities, and he disappears knowing that justice is closing in on him. Amazingly, he pops up. The next mention of him, he pops up on Baggot Street in Dublin, living in an apartment that would ultimately be described in court as a kind of Kinahan safe house. Amazing, incredible stuff.
That was in the summer of 2016 that he's arrested there, because this is basically where he comes in the aftermath of this very significant hit.
Yeah.
When he really needs to go to ground, when he needs to lie low, he comes directly to Dublin, because over the course of the next few months, what is later found in the apartment and on his laptop and computer is a series of photographs of him out and about in Dublin. He's having visits from a partner. He's taking his child to Dublin Zoo. He is lying low here on Baggot Street, and presumably frequenting some pubs in the area and some restaurants. Any of us could have brushed shoulders with this guy. He was actually arrested by the police from the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, who say they randomly
came across him
in that apartment. I never really believe in random when it comes to these seriously high-resourced operations with a lot of intelligence. But nonetheless, we'll take that. They place him in custody in Ireland because he's found with a number of items, including false passports.
Yeah, fake passports is effectively what he gets arrested for here.
And he's also found with very expensive Rolex watches. So they start investigating him, or certainly holding him on the basis of fraud and money laundering through the watches. So he's placed in custody. A little part of the story that's not covered by the BBC, but which I find fascinating, is when he's in custody in Ireland, he's down in Portlaoise High Security Prison. And El Rico, his Chilean buddy, who is the link between the cocaine gangs and the sort of the Macra Mafia plus the Kinahans. He's one of these very high end. I mean, he would be probably within his own grouping at the same level as Daniel Kinahan or Sean McGovern. And he actually is caught, probably on the phones, he's caught making a plan to break Fassi out of Portlaoise High Security Prison. Now, such is the level of this plan and the their seriousness of carrying it out, that the Dutch military fly into Ireland and return him to the Netherlands. They bring him under armed guard and they place him in an even more secure prison over there, while he then awaits trial for a number of gangland murders that he's believed to have conducted. So initially, when this whole thing unravelled and Fassi was the main suspect of this hit, and it was believed that the Dutch Macra Mafia must have had some sort of a relationship with the Iranian regime, that they must have done the deal to take him out. That was believed for a long time. And it's really until we have our quotes on this programme from Jack Kelly that we realise that it wasn't them. They were subcontracted.
Yes.
Or so it is believed by Daniel Kinahan.
Oh, totally, because, people always believe that the Kinahans just knew them from the drugs business and maybe put them up. Not that they were central to this murder plot, this dissident killing. But I'll read out what Jack Kelly says about the Kinahans. He says, "The way I heard it, the Kinahans were actually the ones who made the connection on behalf of Iran to provide the assassin. The dude who actually did the shooting was someone who was familiar with the Kinahans." Later on, he says, as the investigation has gone on, he says, during that time, the Kinahans weren't just flashing red. This is amongst the US government circles, the different agencies investigating Hezbollah and various other things. He said they were flashing bright red, specifically Daniel Kinahan. And he claims, he further describes why the Kinahans and the Iranians would work together. He says they developed those ties through Iran, through the Hezbollah, and he says sometimes groups like the Kinahans can become very helpful to these regimes. It's more like, what can the Kinahans do for us? And that doesn't always mean let's make some money for crime, but on a strategic level, the objectives of Iran mean killing people, Iranian dissidents, which the regime believes to deserve to be assassinated. So, I mean, really, when you look at this program, you can see how this murder links directly to that day in 2022 in Dublin Castle, where the American government stand up and put sanctions on a gang that originated in Oliver Bond only a few decades before. I mean, an incredible moment. You can see Jack Kelly has headed up this operation looking into Hezbollah, and that, as he says, the Kinahan name starts ringing these big bells amongst all these agencies. When they say red flags,
it means that they are on alerts. There's different alerts for people. If you had in Dublin in, let's say, 2007, 2006, as the Kinahans were becoming big players in Spain, etc., typed in a name into a search system in the Garda Síochána, Christopher Kinahan Jr., for example, somebody searching or looking, it lights it up in various, as they call it, specialist units all over. And all of a sudden it's like, so as they know if someone's looking, there's a reason. Have you got some intel?
Yeah.
You see what you're seeing there from what we've described. We talk a lot about circumstantial cases, and I'm not suggesting that there is a case being presented before the courts for Daniel Kinahan's, contracting the death of the innocent electrician who turns out to be an on-the-run Iranian dissident. But there could be, right? There could be. But when we talk about circumstantial evidence and we talk about having threads of information and evidence and them kind of, coming together to form a rope, what you have there is you have the Kinahans lighting up in American, the DEA. You have the links to the Hezbollah and what's going on historically there. You have the murder of Mohammed Reza Kalahi Sama in the Netherlands, the mystery surrounding that, the identity of Nawaf al-Fassi, and then the big thread is the fact that he's found in hiding in a Kinahan safe house, provided presumably at that time, when you look at it, by the person who took out the contract and hired him to do the killing. Now, he was, I think, tried in relation to this, appealed it, and has been kind of jailed in relation to the murder, but is not actually one of the, there's other murders that he's serving time for his role in. But this particular one, I think he has appealed something successfully on it. Again, Dutch law is
slightly different. No, he was...
Paul Vux on to talk to us about this.
Yeah, in 2019, Fassi was jailed for life for organising this murder. But earlier this year, the Court of Appeal found that while there was evidence that he tried to solicit the murder, there was not enough evidence to show he was involved in the actual murder. Yeah. And the court said acting as an intermediary and conduit is not enough to demand a life sentence. So he was convicted on appeal of the crime of attempted solicitation of murder, and he had other convictions for money laundering and another gun attack upheld. So he, in the court, it said Fassi spoke with apparent ease and without any moral sense about this murder as a purely business matter, a nice gig. So
yeah, but in court he was described as somebody with that, that severe personality disorder. Like he has absolutely no empathy for anybody, and he was actually examined in the Netherlands by medics, and this is what they have come up with as being his diagnosis. Take you back 1 year before this happened in December of 2015 in the Netherlands, and you have Nawaf al-Fassi at a meal in Benahavas in Spain, up in the hills, and he's sitting with a guy who was, prior to Ridwan Taghi's kind of elevation to the top cocaine boss in the Netherlands, the cocaine boss, and we'll call him Scarface because that was his nickname. And he was another kind of Dutch Moroccan. But just before he's shot dead, before Scarface is shot dead, Nawaf al-Fassi sort of yawns and put his arm out and puts it around him, gives him a hug. And with that, from the darkness, a hitman runs at the table and pumps a couple of bullets into Scarface's head, leaving the way for Ridwan Taghi's grouping to kind of take over. Yeah. And of course, go back a little bit further and you have links between Scarface with Mink Koch, a Lebanese guy who has been in the drug game for years and who was a very close associate with the original Christy Kinahan Sr. when he bedded down to make his connections in Amsterdam. So you have these pieces of a jigsaw constantly forming. I mean, the life these people have lived, the connections they've made, and what the end jigsaw will look like, because there's still quite a lot of it to really, be fitted into place, is just an extraordinary life. And I don't say that in hero worship or anything of them. No. I just find it amazing, the connections that they've made along the way. Nothing is obviously too much for them. When you think of Daniel Kinahan having made it into initially the big league of drug dealers here in Ireland, and this is what the BBC show I think does really well, and it then brings them to Spain where they try and take their place on the Costa del Sol, and then you see them quickly emerging as the Irish Mafia, which previously to really 2014 never exist. 2010 in actual fact is when they were initially called the Irish Mafia, when the Spanish and Europol tried to take them down with Operation Shovel. They're called the Irish Mafia, and they're seen as the first Irish grouping that can rival the Colombians, the Russians, and the other mafias on the Costa. But that's not enough. They then go from there to the bigger ambition, which is Dubai, and to forming a European super cartel with the likes of Ridwan Taghi, with Raffaele Imperiale from the Italian mafia, and with Eden Gassanin from the Balkans. They create that, okay? All the while, Daniel Kinahan has time to become the leading individual in world boxing, and to bring Tyson Fury back from the brink of extinction to become the heavyweight boxing champion of the world. And even then, it's not enough. They're sanctioned by the US Treasury, and they continue onwards to world domination of the cocaine market, to bedding down in the United Arab Emirates with the protection of the royal family there.
Yeah. I mean
it's baffling.
The scale of the story is incredible.
And if the BBC didn't tell you about it, you wouldn't believe it.
No,
the truth of it,
of course.
That does bring it. It's that the punch it packs. A lot of what we're talking about, we know about. We'd try and tell somebody and they'd like, yeah, right.
But I suppose when you see a guy like Jack Kelly, and people can Google him, and just because you see the level that he was operating in the DEA, and there's fascinating stuff about that whole project into the Hezbollah, which they weren't necessarily trying to bring prosecutions even. They had 40 or 50 people really gathering intelligence.
Let me find Miles Johnson's book, because I wanted to say that if you're interested in that end of it, in the Operation Cassandra, you told me it's called, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've spoken to Miles Johnson a number of times.
Major project Cassandra.
And he is working for the Financial Times, and Miles created a podcast called Dirty Money.
Yeah.
And I just want to get you the name.
Okay, well, and I tell you the funny thing just about what you said about Daniel. So he's operating, he's hitting the heights of cocaine, he's hitting the height with the boxing. And incredibly, like, when you hear the boxers talking about him, the individual boxers, not just Tyson Fury, they talk about the amount of time he would give them and the personal touch.
I know.
Like, it is incredible. An incredible scale.
So what would he have done in the legitimate world?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I suppose when you have the threat of murder, you can get places a lot quicker than if you have to do PowerPoint presentations to make your case.
As you were talking there, I just wanted to get the name of this book for anybody who's interested in that. It's Chasing Shadows, a true story of drugs, war, and the secret world of international crime. And it's Little Brown Book Group. You know, you'd find it on Amazon or whatever, by Miles Johnson from the Financial Times. Miles does appear actually in the documentary as well, but he is a friend of this podcast. We've spoken to him loads of times in relation to big brain issues, which you can't really talk.
No, well, speak for yourself.
Ability to
simplify it.
Simplify stuff, and to talk to the ordinary person about this sort of really high-end money laundering.
But you see this stuff about Hezbollah, it sounds so unrealistic the first time you're starting to speak about it. But obviously then you see, you know, the Financial Times and all of that. And then there's the whole other undiscovered territory really about the connections with Russia and what the Kinahans have been doing there.
Yeah.
Now we know what's being said. Some of it has started to come out. There's been a massive money laundering operation busted in the UK and across France. But there's a whole other, they had their fingers in a whole other set of pots there. And it's also believed in places in the Far East, in Asia as well. And
Yemen and troubled regions of the world where dirty money moves very welcomingly through a system where there's corrupt governments and all the rest of it. And when we look back at what we garnered from, I think it was the ICIJ, they were looking into Christy Kinahan Senior's sort of postings on LinkedIn and stuff like that over a period of time, which was after and around the sanctions. And he is very engaged with the political activities and the likes of Yemen, way back to Dublin in 2016, when the Kinahans set up their own fake social media site called Sir Sean. As it sort of teetered out of the kind of the information that was only relevant to here, it was obviously on some sort of an automatic posting. That was all about Russia, Yemen, and all these territories of the world, which are so unwelcoming of the West and to the West, and where this, our Dublin Premiership drug gang have found friends and have,
Yeah.
just extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. And, so, I mean, the activities of Hezbollah and that investigation by the DEA, we've heard in the Senate ultimately in 2022, that was effectively shut down when there was a deal done with Iran over their nuclear weapons program, and the DEA were kind of pulled off that by the Obama regime at the time. So, I mean, incredibly interesting even in that. But what does all of that mean now with Trump being elected? I mean, Trump is a particular ally of Israel, particularly, interested in shutting down Iran. They're in talks, obviously, at the moment. So all of this, these high-level geopolitical factors, are they going to affect getting people back from Dubai to face justice in an Irish court? And how are they going to affect it?
And also, how tiny are we as a little nation? I mean, we're so insignificant on the world stage, really, Ireland. We demand
Daniel back.
Daniel might have a pal, and
he might.
He'll just give you the big giant political finger.
Exactly. And of course, not to get even more complex, but the UAE are at war with the Houthis, who have been bombed by the Trump. So you just don't know how all of this plays out. But we do know for sure that the decision to extradite him will be a political decision made in that country. That our guards and our government have done their absolute best. I mean, nobody could deny that, to get him back. But, this isn't a normal justice process. There's a political involvement. And I suppose the Kinahans are praying to God that the political winds blow in their direction.
Praying to which God?
Well, I don't know.
I don't.
All of them or any of them.
Yeah,
but
I thought they had, they were living the Gulf way.
Well, I think Daniel was into the old self-help and visualising and stuff like that. Yeah.
Look, anyway, fascinating. Anybody who hasn't seen that series, go and watch it. I think if you hit record, this is really basic. For the last episode, you get all the other episodes, do you? You do on my TV, I think.
You can do it depending on your TV.
It just depends on the TV or your...
Well, I think so, yeah. I'm
sure anybody who'd have a dodgy box would be able to watch it.
well, I don't know.
I don't know. Can you get BBC Player on a dodgy box?
Can you be prosecuted for promoting dodgy boxes? Imagine.
Terrible. And at Easter as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's leave that.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.